Here in the great country of America, we like gravy on our biscuits, barbecue on our pork, and fry on our chicken. But it turns out the rest of the world doesn't eat the same things we do. So I'm setting off on a journey to uncover the most popular products in other countries and redesign them to see how they'd look if they were made in the USA. And today we're starting with the place that ran out of bowls, so they have to eat their beans on a slice of toast, the United Kingdom. So as a disclaimer, I know very little about the UK, other than they drive on the wrong side of the road and Sherlock Holmes lives there. But I was reliably informed that Jaffa cakes, which we have right here, are one of the most popular snacks in the country. If you've never heard of them, they're basically like a layer of sponge cake covered in chocolate with an orange jelly filling in the middle. I don't know what kind of jellyfish you have to milk to get orange jelly, but it looks a little suspicious to me. Admittedly, this box has a cool design, but literally everything is an orange. The sides are an orange, the logo is an orange, and even the background is an orange that's held its breath too long. This kind of overwhelming, heavy texture is typically something we don't see on US products that much. So for my American-made version, we're gonna start with a clean blue background. And you know, the one thing I did notice about the original package is that it doesn't actually have a picture of the Jaffa cakes on here. I'd say you'll basically always see a picture of the food on pretty much any US product, unless the package is just like too small for it, or the product is self-explanatory. But you know, even some bottled water labels have pictures of water on them. So I'm gonna make sure to show off a beautiful little Jaffa cake to get those American appetites going. I'll separate the cake from the background, of course, but then I'll leave a copy of the image behind it, set its blend mode to multiply, and that'll let me preserve the original realistic shadows from it. A little tip for all of you designers out there. I specifically chose this image with a bite out of it so we could make sure to see all of the internal bits, especially that creamy orange jelly inside, because you know, people just usually want a good sense of what they're buying. Now the blue and orange color palette of the original design just works perfectly together. But instead of skinning another poor orange alive, how about we just go with a smooth curved banner that helps frame the cake and draws extra attention to it. Then a small yellow rim will help separate the dark blue from the dark orange, and we'll need a little lighting on this background to help match the lighting we see on the cake. Maybe a slight 3D effect on that rim will help raise it up so it doesn't feel overly flat, just a really subtle shadow in the tiniest of rim lights. So our cake is now proudly displayed for all to see, which means this giant empty section right here can house the logo. Once again, the orange peel logo looks really cool, but sometimes it does help to get a second opinion on the effectiveness of a logo, which is why I have recently launched a new version of my app, Logo Lab. It's used by tens of thousands of people each month, and now it's even better. I've dropped in the Jaffa Cakes logo, and Logo Lab ran its tests and generated us this report. We can see its personality is playful, natural, and whimsical, and it likely appeals to young audiences and people looking for sweet snacks, which is just what we want. It clearly communicates the orange aspect of the product, but the textured letters might lose detail at very small sizes, which was kind of exactly my biggest concern for it, so I think I'll keep that same overall structure to preserve that natural, playful feeling by just converting these letters to simple white vector shapes. The Logo Lab report already shows that the logo is visually balanced, so there's no need to change the letter shapes that much, but I do think the J could use a little hood just to help fill in this gap right here in the letters. You can see how the original logo clearly struggled at small sizes, not even scoring well at the largest sizes of those test cases. And not only that, of course, but the top half was way more visually complex than the bottom of the logo because of all of these harsh textured highlights, making it feel a little top heavy. All of that though is fixed by these simpler white letters, which admittedly still could use something to spice them up. So how about a very slight 3D effect, which is super common for these types of logos here in the US. The Logo Lab color palette test did show that the oranges and yellows of the original logo were very harmonious and felt really citrusy, but since we already have those colors in the banner here, I see no need to repeat them over in the logo, but some slight shading to play off that blue background will work perfectly instead. I might even strip away some of that to form a delicate rim light for extra contrast. Speaking of which, you can see in the report how the original logo really struggled with contrast, like it didn't even get good scores on pure black or pure white, just because its letters are pretty dark, hence why they had to have this massively heavy shadow to help it pop out. The new logo, of course, is much brighter, so it doesn't have those same problems, and so while unnecessary, a little extra drop shadow never hurt anyone. The report even has color blindness simulations and edge complexity analysis. Basically, it's got everything you need to find and fix flaws in your logo designs. You can even share the reports with a simple link or download them as a PDF. Honestly, it's great to run tests on a potential client's current logo so you can find all its flaws and use that to help convince them that they need to hire you to redesign it. So if you want, try it out with the link down below. Now, this little empty spot down here is the perfect place to help tell people what this strange orange goo is, because orange jelly is just not something the average American is used to seeing. So to be extra clear, I'll just straight up stick an orange on here, give it some nice lighting so it pops out, get that text resting inside a little blue box, you know, something that doesn't draw too much attention, but that just looks like it's been delicately carved out of the background. And so if the UK's beloved orange-filled treats were made across the pond in the US of A, I think this is pretty close to what they'd look like, and I gotta say, I kind of prefer it. And then up next we have Marmite. Now don't get this confused with Vegemite, that is from Australia, and the UK is not Australia. Now if you ask me what Marmite is, well, it says it's made from yeast extract, which frankly still doesn't tell me much. Apparently it's very much a you love it or hate it type of thing. Some people say it's extremely salty and savory, kind of like a mega condensed soy sauce. This design though is honestly something I could see here in the US for like a product that's going for an old-fashioned, old-timey vibe. But I definitely think the board of this company would be sitting around talking about how they need a fresh new brand to make a product many people are squeamish about feel more friendly and approachable. Maybe an updated look that appeals to the modern young audiences of today. Maybe they even need a brand new website to boost online sales. Well, then they should be using Framer, the sponsor of today's video. Framer is an amazing tool for designing, building, and launching websites. I used it to design and build my own fully custom site, and now that I've launched Logo Lab, I want to update my homepage here. Since I have full control over everything, I can just change the title of this section, give it a new description to match the product, and replace this image with a fun little video of a logo being analyzed. Even changing the layout of these is super easy just by dragging things around. So now the Logo Lab section shows up first. Of course, Framer lets me set up breakpoints for my site so that it's fully responsive across all devices, and you can see the changes I made on the desktop version propagate over to the tablet and mobile versions without me having to do any extra work. Framer's design tools are really similar to something like Figma, but instead of just making designs, you're creating fully functional websites, and you don't even have to know how to code. I can test my site at any time with their built-in previewer to make sure everything works, like ensuring all of my interactive elements are set up properly, and that all the pages on my site, from my contact form to the list of apps and gear I use, to my product pages full of videos and animations, making sure everything looks great. They've got tons of templates to help you get started, or you can always just build your site from scratch like I did. But the best part is you can sign up for free. So check out my link down below and use my promo code to get 25% off your plan whenever you're ready to launch. Thanks to Framer for sponsoring this video. So let's see if we can give Marmite a fresh, friendlier, modern look for US audiences, starting with a solid red background since that is one of their main brand colors. And then let's just add in a yellow ring similar to the one that was on the original, because it really just helps the label pop off that dark jar. Now I think one of the biggest problems Marmite would face here in the US is that nobody would know what to do with it. We'd have people out here looking at this brown goop trying to rub it on their joints to fix their arthritis or something. But I'm told the most common use case seems to be spreading a thin layer of it on a piece of toast, which is definitely what I want to show here with a clear product example. Here's some goop that resembles Marmite enough for our purposes, so I do want to darken it up a bit to make it appear thicker. I know true Brits will say that is way too much Marmite for one piece of toast, but we've just got to balance reality with making sure the spread is visible enough on the package. So just imagine whoever prepared this piece of toast really loves Marmite. Now, even though the OG package had its logo surrounded by this big red banner, I'd say it's this yellow color that actually draws the most attention, and it's probably what I would consider the main brand color, as evidenced by this bright yellow lid. So I'm thinking something like a yellow arch here at the bottom could help bring back that duotone vibe, although it does look a tad too sharp. So maybe rounding off those edges, making something like a bean shape, would give us the color contrast we want, while also building a really well-defined space for the logo. How about a touch of shading for our little bean, and a really subtle shadow so the edge looks slightly raised. Of course, that edge could use a touch of shading as well. And now for the logo. You can definitely see here we've got a more friendly, approachable look with these soft, rounded shapes. So ideally, I'd like to find a font that has those same characteristics. Something like this should work perfectly, and to keep it from feeling too stiff, let's just wrap that around the top of the toast. Maybe even have the top around it as well. Heck, I might even stretch out the sides a bit to really mesh with that bean shape, turning this into something that feels loose and squishy, almost like Marmite itself. I'd like a bit more contrast between the logo and the background though, and a really cool technique to use in these cases is to color a stroke around the letters that's the same as the background color, and then add a little drop shadow to it so everything kind of fades out at the top but really stands out at the bottom, giving you a really neat 3D effect without using 3D letters. And like all products that seem yucky at first glance, we need to give people a reason to try it, and vitamins are a good enough reason as any. However, because it's still impossible to tell what this stuff is just by looking at it, I am going to place a product description right here directly over top of the spread, bringing back some of that green used in the original package's color palette so everything feels nice and familiar. So we've gone from a traditional old-aged British style to a more fun, approachable version of Marmite that I think you might see here in the US. It still resembles its roots, and I think it looks great. And then we have Twiglets, which seems to be a staple snack in the land of the tall fuzzy hats. They're described as a baked wheat snack with a yeast extract coating similar to Marmite. And obviously the giant text saying high in fiber, oven baked, not fried, tells us that this product is trying to appear like a healthier snack option. I'd say here in the US, we don't really have a lot of black food packaging. There are exceptions, of course, but it is more rare because darker packaging just doesn't stand out on store shelves very well. For healthier foods, we often use more earthy tones that feel light, airy, and natural, like this bright tan color. Now, I have noticed that a lot of brands in the UK don't really show off that much of the food on the package. Of course, neither the Jaffa Cakes nor the Marmite had any food picture, but take a look at this British potato chip brand, Walker's, with an entire 2 chips on the whole bag. And then we have the American counterpart with like 17 chips and half a raw potato for good measure. Sadly, Twiglets is afflicted by this same curse with a measly 3 twigs on the bag. So in true American fashion, reason, I've got this giant bowl of them to use instead. Because of course here, bigger is always better. Now the wooden bowl does bring a nice, elegant, natural vibe to things, but we need something to help separate it from the tin background, like a vibrant, bright red ring, which also happens to be Twiglet's main brand color. These snacks are quite known for being really bumpy and lumpy, so I'll roughen up the edges of the ring to play off that and give it more of a handmade feel, which is also a common visual cue of healthy foods here in the US. Since that takes up a lot of room on the bag, I'm gonna squeeze the product description inside it. Wrapping it around the bowl shows a clear relationship between those two elements, and giving it a handwritten font like this will match the handmade feel I'm going for. And frankly, these types of fonts are always so nice to work with because you can make all sorts of modifications to them, like cutting off these letters so they don't overlap, and nobody can really even tell. Then I'll use the bottom of this ring to house the important health information, like it being 80% whole grain and high in fiber. Can we just take a minute to appreciate how the British can't spell it all? I mean, who in their right mind spells fiber this way? It just makes no sense to me. Either way, I'm gonna grab this little weed icon and use it to make my own versions to fill in the empty spaces on the side of the bowl, which I also think will really help sell the weedy nature of this product. Now, honestly, I really like the standard Twiglets logo. It matches perfectly with the style of the rest of the bag, especially if I make it darker so it has some contrast, but it does feel just a tad overly rough. So I'm just gonna trace over it, making sure to keep it nice and loose, but simply to soften up the edges of these a bit to match the same level of smoothness as all the other graphics on the bag. The Jacobs logo, which is the company that makes Twiglets, can be simplified quite a bit, rounded off to match our new style, and I'll make it red to match that big central ring. Now we can't just have a nice looking bowl of Twiglets resting calmly in the center that have never been touched. We need to sprinkle a few of those around the bag, so it looks like people have been shoving their hands in the bowl trying to get at those delicious Twiglets. This should give the design a lot of extra energy and even help fill in some of these empty spots around the bag. The UK design is nice, but it does look a little out of sorts, so I think if the US made healthy pretzel sticks dunked in Marmite, they'd end up with something natural looking but still fun, just like this. Let me know which country's favorite foods you want me to tackle next. Oh, and here's another great design video that I'm sure you will love.